marijuana stations. There was the things that were out there that they were worried about. But that wasn't, they cleaned it up here not to allow that. You have to have a Florida physician, it's only for Florida residents, and the debilitating is now defined. You can't go in there and say, oh, I have a headache, and get medical marijuana. You have to have a debilitating disease, and most of them are listed here. And, oh, and there was another concern about parental consent. They were afraid that kids, especially teenagers, go in, say they got a headache and get medical marijuana. Not anymore. I think the last time it was a little too loose, and this really cleans it up. And it also helps with caregivers giving it, as long as they pass a background check. And now there's, again, they put more restrictions in, state-issued IDs, no recreational use, it's gotta be on debilitating diseases. And it also protects physicians from doing that, because there was concerns about how the physicians are going to be giving that when it's still illegal in the federal level. The ones who support these organizations are the same ones who supported it back in 2014. John Morgan has been pushing for this, and all these other groups. And if you don't allow it, it kind of just keeps the status quo. We do have some medical marijuana now in pill form, and I think for terminally ill people. So it doesn't change what we have now. This will just expand it to other people who cannot access the medical marijuana. And these are the organizations that oppose it, the Chamber of Commerce and Drug Free Florida. And we as a league have not taken any position in this particular amendment. Anybody has any questions on the medical marijuana? Pete?
Well, they still have...
Wait a minute.
Oh. Well, they still have the dispensary idea.
Yeah, but there'll be treatment centers, as they call it, but I think it's going to be well regulated.
Anyone else? Okay,
They're hoping, because it was so close the last time, it was 57%, that with this being cleaned up now and more restrictive, yet more restrictive than it was proposed before, but given more opportunities than what we have now, that it'll pass. So it'll be interesting. I don't see as much controversy with this medical marijuana as the last time. So I'll talk about the exemptions. The first one is exemptions for totally and permanently disabled first responders. So if a first responder is injured in the line of duty, they want to be able to give an opportunity to give them more tax exemptions. Now this is not automatic. This is just opening the door for the legislature to give them a tax exemption if they get injured in the line of duty, and it could be full or partial. And of course, it has to be something that happened while they were in duty. And we really don't know how it's going to impact property taxes, because we're not sure how many people are affected at this point. And if you vote no for this, it just keeps it the status quo. You know, it doesn't give them an extra tax exemption. Now this is a quick one. There's no supporting or opposing organizations. Does anybody have any questions on this tax exemption? Yes, sir.
Who put it on the...
This is by the legislature. We have some back there.
Hold on. You have to get that away from the speaker.
Presently, disabled veterans get this benefit right now. If you are certified with the VA as a 50% disabled veteran, you have a 50% reduction in your property tax. If you're 100% disabled, you get a 100% reduction in your property tax. I think it's only fair that first responders also have this ability too.
This is, yeah, for fire, sheriff, and any kind of emergency personnel. We have two questions over there.
Hold on.
Would this apply to first responders who were injured only in Florida or nationwide or wherever they may be?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I had the impression it's if they were in the line of duty here in Florida.
But there's nothing that says one way or the other.
I'll have to look that one up. Give me your information and I'll look that one up. But as far as I know, it's just if they got injured here in Florida in the line of duty.
Okay, great.
Does this apply only to ad valorem taxes, or does it apply to things like sales tax as well?
Ad valorem, only ad valorem. Any other questions? Those are good questions, thank you. Okay, the homestead exemption for certain senior low-income, long-term residents. So if you had property that's worth, at this time, less than $250,000, and you've been in it for 25 years, and you're elderly, over 65, they are thinking about the opportunity of giving them an additional exemption. Another 25,000, another 50. Now this is the thought is this, and you have to be earning less than $20,000 a year, so it's low income. So let's say somebody has lived in their house a long time, they bought it 25, 30 years ago when the prices were low, and they've been living it all this time, and the property values is going up, and we know we have the $50,000 homestead exception, but in the meantime, they live in an area, let's say close to Siesta, and it keeps going up and up and up, and they're only earning very low, $20,000 a year or less. Well, it might be a problem for them in the future with taxes. So they want to be able to give people who earn less than $20,000, who are above 65, who have lived in the house more than 25 years, and the property values are increasing, the opportunity to give them an additional tax exemption. So they're also concerned they might freeze the $250,000 because a lot of these properties are, as you know, we had it in 2005 when the properties skyrocketed. We're seeing properties skyrocket now, and so they're concerned that as it continues going up, they will be priced out of their homes, and they want to make it retroactive to 2013. You're counting. So the first year, if this gets imposed and we say yes, the first year the impact is about $2 to $3 million only because it's retroactive. So they have to account for anything up to year 2013. In 2017, they expect an impact of about $500,000, and this is statewide. And in 2020, assuming that the property values continue to go up as it has, they expect the impact to be $4.2 million if we said yes. If we said no, really it maintains the status quo for these seniors, and we won't lose any money for the cities and the county. And right now there's no organization supporting or opposing this amendment. Does anybody have any questions about this particular amendment?
Just the dollar figures, do you think those are statewide dollar figures, or are they average per county? Like 2 to 3 million for Sarasota County, or spread out over the whole state?
I was told it was the whole state, but I'll verify that. Because the thing is, our state has a lot of transients. There's not too many people who've been here a long time who earns less than $20,000 a year, and so that's why the impact is not expected to be that major. So, any other questions on that before? Oh, yes.
Did they actually
Wait a
pay
minute.
back last couple
Wait a
of
minute,
taxes?
wait a minute, because we're on videotape.
Would they actually, the idea is that they pay back the taxes for those last 2 years? So it'd be a net outflow, and gather that from that number.
Oh, you mean the retroactive to 2013? On some of them, yeah, they will probably get a tax credit.
Okay.
Okay, this is a League of Women Voters website. Be ready to vote. It's set up so that you can help know about registration, voter information. Just a reminder that the election is November 8th this year, and the last day to register is October 11th. And as you know, there are 3 ways to vote. They used to call it absentee voting. Now they just call it vote by mail. And there was quite a big number of people who voted by mail this past primary. So we're hoping that it's going to be a trend in the future. Of course, there's early voting, and you can vote on Election Day. Okay, before I go into the charter, does anybody have any questions on the amendments, the 4 amendments? No, oh, yes, sir.
Well,
good website to learn more about it is a very comprehensive one called ballotpedia.com.
Oh, Ballotpedia, I like that website. It's like Wikipedia, but it's Ballotpedia.
It includes all these things and who voted for it and et cetera, a lot of details.
Yeah, if you really want it, hopefully you have enough information so that you know how to vote in November. So what I would like to do is, we were talking about constitution of the state level, and so many people are not familiar with the Constitution on the local level. I went to a meeting the other day of university women, and there were about 80 people in the audience. I said, how many people know about the local Constitution? And only 2 people raised their hands. And so it's really important that, again, we inform the public about our local Constitution. And ours is called the Sarasota County Charter. Oh, this is an old one. Sorry, I have to apologize. I improved that, but I put a full one. In 1968, the electors in Florida decided that they're going to allow the counties to create county charters. And they just, same as the state and federal, it just allows for information on their powers, their duties, what they do, and it gives them a better, well, we hope, more control locally. And right now, of the 67 counties that make up Florida, only 20 have charters, their own constitution, and ours is the only elected charter review board. And the 20 counties that have the charter make up 75% of all residents in Florida. That's quite a bit. Now, Sarasota County Charter was adopted 3 years after the state allowed counties to have charters. And since the year 2000, there's only been 8 amendments to our charter. So if you hear people saying, oh, you're constantly amending the charter, we do not. Over 16 years, we've only had 8. And the charter is made up of several sections: what our county government is, and how we are organized. The fact that we have a board of county commissioners. There are 5 board of county commissioners. They are elected county-wide. Home rule, solid waste information, our taxes, which I'll get into in a minute, and how we elect our officials. Some of my favorite amendments to the charter are as follows. The first one is recycling. Back in 1990, when the county was considering recycling, the Board of County Commissions at the time was dragging their feet. Well, the citizens wanted nothing to do with that. They wanted recycling, and they wanted it now. So they provided and created a charter amendment to require recycling in 1990. We also had term limits. Many of you know that we voted for term limits many years ago, about 2004, I believe. And then it was threatened, when was it?
1990, it was 1998.
98. And what happened was it got caught up in the courts. Somebody sued, it was considered unconstitutional, and it didn't go anywhere. Well, Kathy Antunes, who was on the board of CONA, sued and then got it reinstated, and now we have county commission term limits. 4 years each term, 2 terms maximum. In 2006, when we started looking at ballots, electronic ballots, there was a concern. Well, what happened if there's a problem with the machines? What happened if we have a question on how the vote really occurred? Is that accurate? So a group in Sarasota County created a petition and required paper ballots. So we have something to fall back on in case there's any questions. And most paper ballots are held for about, I think, 22 months or something to that effect. To make sure that if there's any questions on an election, or if there's a problem with machines, that we have something we can count on, something that we don't have to worry about that shouldn't be a problem, which is paper ballots. In 2008, thanks to Bill Zoller, if he's still here, oh, there he is back there, there was an amendment put in our charter to kind of protect the rural areas outside of the urban service boundary. If you may know, that county has an urban area, which is supposed to be sort of west of I-75, and rural outside of that. And I could spend a whole meeting talking about whether they are actually following the rules of that urban service, but we'll move on. Now, A lot of people talk about limits to campaign contributions, and that they don't know that in Sarasota County, we have limits to campaign contributions. There's a $200 limit on campaign contributions to local candidates for those who are paid. So it doesn't really apply to school board, it doesn't really apply to charter review board because they're unpaid, but there is a $200 limit for any paid position in local government. Another favorite, bonding limitations. The county cannot issue, without a referendum, any notes or bonds or any kind of debt of more than $17 million. They said $17 million in the county charter, but because it is adjusted by the consumer price index, it's really about 21 million. I love this part. So when the sports team comes in and asks for a $100 million sports stadium in Northport for 6 weeks worth of them being in town, the county couldn't come, well, they could have come to us and asked for us to vote whether or not we want it. They didn't, probably because our answer is going to probably be no, not for a sports team. And so they had to find a different way, private way, to make an offer to the sports team. So this referendum requirement for anything above 21 million, I think it's good for us. So if the county wants to do anything with a big organization or company, they have to ask us if we would allow them to spend that kind of money. How amendments are made, how does it get on the ballot? It's very similar to state amendments. You can do a citizens initiative, and those are petitions created by the citizens, usually reviewed by a lawyer. And in Sarasota County, since they have to just focus in the county level, they need about 14,000 signed petitions by verified signed petitions of voters in order to get something on the ballot for us to vote. The county commission can also review and propose charter amendments. And the charter review board, they meet 3 times a year, sometimes 4. There's 10 members to the board, 2 per district. So if you know what your district is, you'll know you have 2 charter review board members that represent you. And they are elected, every election you're going to have at least, well, not least, about 5 charter review board members up for election, since they stagger the elections of the charter review board. And we're fortunate, because we have the only elected charter review board in the state of Florida. But that's the threat. What's being proposed, it was proposed in May to change the charter review board from an elected board to an appointed board. And they want it appointed by the county commission. They used the argument, first argument, they would say, well, we're the only elected board, as if that's, and okay, again, I apologize, I can't be unbiased on this. Okay, so I'm going to be very vocal on my position on this. They claim that because we're the only elected, we should follow the other 19 and have an appointed board. That was one excuse. The second excuse was a red herring. There was a group of citizens, mostly Tea Partiers, who had an idea of a citizen grand jury. Now, the citizen grand jury was supposed to be outside of the law, looking at cases where they can prosecute people who violate the law. Now, of course, it's unconstitutional. They used their First Amendment right of free speech and petitioned the government to propose to this charter review board this idea. Now, the reason why it rubs the politicians the wrong way is they weren't trying to go after criminals who steal. They wanted to go after politicians. And that scared the politicians. Okay, now it's true they couldn't do it because it was not something you can do constitutionally, but nothing scares politicians more than having a group of citizens here determining whether they've been ethical or if they committed a crime. So that is the reason why they're a little upset about the citizen grand jury. But see, even if it wasn't something they could do, there were citizens who had an idea. They went in front of the charter review board, they proposed the idea. I agree, they proposed it one too many times, so there must be limits on how many times you can propose the same idea. But that's what they did. They exercised their free speech they exercised their right to petition a government for an idea, they were denied. There was 2 people on the board who said, well, maybe we should think about it. 2 out of 10, okay? But I think they were being very kind. But for some reason, people have hooked onto that as a reason to change our charter review board from elected to appointed. Now, many of you know me. You know I've been very active since 2001. I have been there for zoning issues. I have been really vocal on a lot of concerns I have on development. And I tried to get appointed on the Planning Commission for a year. Couldn't get on there. I'm not a big campaign contributor, and I'm not very friendly. I'm very vocal. Oh God, John Thaxton couldn't get on the Planning Commission. He tried for 2 years. So, and this is after he left office. So for me, I prefer the opportunity to be able to run for Charter Review Board, because I'll know as a citizen, I'll never get appointed for Charter Review Board, because you have to be kind of close to the county commissioners in order to do that, or the biggest campaign contributors. So I really am opposed to changing it from elected to appointed. So oops, you went too fast. That's okay. No, oh yeah, go to previous. Go down 1. I can talk about it. That's okay. She had a trigger. So what is it that special interests want to change? Okay, because I've been talking to people trying to find out, why do they want it appointed? Why do they want the county commission to control, besides the fact having control over every elected board as well? And one of the things they were concerned with was term limits. I mean, they did fight the idea of term limits. You know, there's always an effort to try to control the county commission, and once they get them in there, it's hard to get them out. So they didn't like the term limits. Of course, they didn't like the limits of development outside the urban service boundary, and they're constantly attacking. There's concerns about the $200 limit to campaign contributions. They would love to give more. You know, you hear about 44 $200 contributions that was given to Charles Hines by the Benderson family, and you take that out and make it $1,000, they could still afford a $44,000 each check as well. And so it would make it harder for grassroots to really go out and run for something like county commission. And one that surprised me, but again, I was talking to a few people, including people who were on the board, and the bonding limitations. We are so behind in road infrastructure. We have to have about $100 or several $100 million of road projects. And to come to us on another referendum asking us for money, they did that before. We said okay to $300 million, and I'm analyzing, where did they spend that $300 million? You know, they shouldn't have spent it on $21 million on Siesta Beach. I mean, I love the beach. I live on Siesta Key. It is beautiful. But the problem was, while they're spending $21 million on the beach, the sheriff's office needed about $20 million for new radios, because theirs were so antique, they couldn't find parts, and that had been pushed off. You know, they did the beach first, and they didn't do the radios. And so that's why there was almost a proposal this year for the sheriff's office to get money. But they also want to add things like roads and other projects. They don't want to raise our property taxes, but if they can bond it out over time, you know, they can get all these projects done. So that's a problem. I think that's one of the things they would love to get their hands on. So the Charter Review Board took it under advisement when they got the suggestion to make it an appointed board, and they are going to have a special meeting to discuss it, and before they go to the public meeting. The public meeting is October 12th. The special meeting is going to be September 28th at the County Commission meeting, County Commission Administration Building in their chambers at 6 p.m. And this is a special meeting to discuss this idea, so they can present it to the public at the public meeting on October 12th. So if you're interested, I suggest you go to the meeting, you listen to what's being proposed, make your voices heard ahead of time if you like, that if you don't want it to go appointed. Any questions on the charter?
Question,
Hold on.
He's
videotaping.
Sorry. Okay, on the September 28 meeting, it's not going to be a public hearing, but will it be open to the public? In other words, if one goes to the September 28 meeting, Charter Review Board, will there be an opportunity to speak?
I don't think so. I have not been to a special meeting before, so I think it's their discussion. The public meeting would be the one on October 12th.
And when do they put it on the ballot, assuming they do want to put it on?
If the Charter Review Board decides that they like the idea and they approve it at the October 12th meeting, it has to go through legal review for the language, and then it has to go in front of the County Commission for approval, so there's a public hearing there, and then it gets on the ballot. If it works really well, maybe 2018. Unless they do a special one, but I doubt they're going to do a special one for that. Vic? And then Ron? Or Ron first?
Is there any movement on the open primary for the state?
No, the League of Women Voters are working. There's a committee working on advocating for open primaries, but there's nothing so far. There is 2 proposed amendments to the Sarasota County Charter, petitions that are being circulated by SAFE. I think it's the Sarasota Alliance for Fair Elections. They're both to propose member-only districts for County Commission and member-only districts for Charter Review Board. For those who are not familiar with what means by member-only district, right now we vote for County Commission and Charter Review Board countywide. So if I ran for County Commission in 2014, I would have to convince voters in Northport to vote for me, even though I lived on Siesta Key. The idea is by having member-only districts, I would only be voted by the people in my district, which means I could limit my campaigning to my district, which is Siesta, Pommel Ranch, Casey Key. I wouldn't have to go all over the county. There's going to be pros and cons to that idea, but there is a petition being proposed for member-only districts. And I think there might be other petitions circulating as well, but those are the 2 I'm familiar with, but not open primaries. Any other questions? Vic? Vic.
When I was running for charter, I put in some research. So there were a couple of holes in here. I just want to fill in the holes. Number one, there's a third way, there's a fourth way that the charter can be reviewed. It can be on the ballot, and the state legislature can actually put it on our ballot.
Right.
Okay, but if any of those other 3 are used, if the county commission puts it on, if the county commission puts it on, if the state legislature puts it on, or if it's on by ballot initiative, an election for that has to be held within 60 days. It's only when the Charter Review Board puts it on that it goes on the next scheduled election. So if you had a special election for one thing in 60 days, you'd get a very small turnout.
And the process is the Charter Review Board puts it on through the County Commission. They still have to approve the resolution to get it on the November ballot.
And then the second thing is, what happened in 1998 when the voters here, the Charter Review Board proposed term limits. The voters approved it. The County Commission went to court and got a local judge to rule it unconstitutional, but only at the lowest level. So what happened was no one appealed it. So then some years later on the East Coast, there was a similar thing, but it was appealed. So the appellate division on the East Coast said, guess what, it is constitutional. So then everyone knew it was going to go to the state Supreme Court, which it did. And then when the state Supreme Court said, yes, it's constitutional, then about 50 people here in this county got together and brought the lawsuit. As soon as they filed, they collapsed because they already knew there was a precedent at the highest level.
But I heard when it got challenged, it wasn't challenged by the county commission, but somebody challenging the county commission on that. I thought it was a person.
I think that was one of those, how can I say, a straw person.
Yeah, right.
Right, it wasn't, and the other thing is the person who's proposing this change. Does everyone know here who the person who's proposing the change?
I didn't mention that.
Well, everyone should know. It's Bob Wachter, and he was charged and pleaded guilty to 2 felonies. Apparently, the second one was not adjudicated as a felony.
What was a misdemeanor?
Even though he pleaded to it, you know more about than I do.
Yeah, for those who don't know, he stole my identity to make illegal contributions and was arrested in 2012. And so obviously he's not looking out for the citizens. He was trying to stop me from running for county commission. And it was a misdemeanor and a felony. The felony was adjudicated and he got slapped on the wrist for the misdemeanor.
Yeah, and I actually...
And he just happened to be a campaign worker and contributor and host for this state attorney who gave them that misdemeanor as a side.
And I actually interviewed the officer who arrested him for burglary back in 1979, who ended up retiring as a captain from the sheriff's department. And there had been a story going around, a rumor, that it was really he owned the property and it was a landlord-tenant thing. It was nothing of the kind. I read his confession.
Well, I don't want to take away from
okay.
what the actual problem is, which is changing it from elected to appointed, which is why I didn't bring that up. But just to let you know, I know that if anything is proposed, it has to go before us, even the fact that it's going to be appointed versus elected. But the problem is, do you remember the solar amendment? And as I read it before, things could be phrased that sounds great, like, oh yeah, that sounds great, we should do this. And it can be really deceptive. So I really encourage you to speak up if you feel the same way, or if you don't speak up. Sorry, just only kidding. But truly, I think it's against our democratic process to take away something that we have right now, which is we are able to elect a charter review board. I think it's important to know who your candidates are, know your charter, know your candidates, and let's protect it, because Sarasota is special, and having an elected charter, before you wind up putting pictures up there that I don't want, do not touch. Close it. Okay, thank you. And that's going to go on videotape. I'm like, what pictures must she have on there? So I really want people to know what the charter is. This is giving me, if I have to say thank you to Bob Wachter, this is giving me the opportunity to go throughout the county and explain what a charter is, because you should know what our Constitution is and what it entails, because there is going to probably be a proposal to change the bonding limitations. There'll probably be a proposal to change other things in the charter. You should know what it entails. The more people who know, I believe in an informed public, the better decisions we can make on our election day.